Welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're going to treat language not as some flat, dusty list of grammar rules you have to memorize, but as a multidimensional physics engine. If you're a cognitive scientist, a linguistic student, or a communication researcher, you already know that analyzing text can sometimes feel a bit like trying to nail jelly to a wall. It's slippery. But today, we're translating the dense, brilliant theory from Halliday and Mathewson's seminal work into crystal-clear visual logic. We're going to completely deconstruct the architecture of systemic functional linguistics, SFL for short, and reveal the invisible mechanics that actually power human communication.
Here's our roadmap for the breakdown. First up, the architecture of meaning. Second, we'll hit the three metafunctional strands. Third, dispersed domains of meaning. Fourth, the mechanics of modality. And we'll wrap it all up with grammatical metaphor in action.
All right, let's jump right into section 1, the architecture of meaning, moving from the text down to the clause.
Let's establish what actually exists beyond a simple clause. Consider a real-world news report, like one detailing a tragic boat collision on the River Thames. Now, folk wisdom, and honestly, the way most of us were taught back in grade school, tells us that a text like this is just a bunch of clauses and sentences stacked on top of each other, right? Like bricks in a wall. But in SFL, the relationship between a text and a clause is vastly more powerful and it's much more indirect. There's no simple part-to-whole relationship here.
And this perfectly illustrates the physics of what we call stratification. Meaning and grammar, they don't even sit on the same level. They exist on entirely different planes. A text is a semantic phenomenon. It's a unit of meaning. It relates to clauses through a process called realization. Think of it exactly like the weather. An overarching climate, that's your semantics, your text, is realized by transient daily weather events, and that's your lexicogrammar, your clauses. You can't just tally up a bunch of rainy days and claim they physically compose a climate. The climate is the higher-order system that dictates those daily weather patterns.
Moving right along to section 2, the three metafunctional strands, and how we map semantics to grammar.
Once we really grasp realization, we have to ask the obvious question: what exactly is the clause realizing? Well, the answer is that every single clause you utter is a multifunctional machine. It's working in 3 dimensions simultaneously to realize 3 entirely distinct units of meaning. First, you have the textual strand, which builds the flow of information to guide your listener. Second, the interpersonal strand, where we negotiate propositions and proposals. This is the social reality of the dialogue. And third, the ideational strand, which maps the actual episodic chronological figures of our real-world experience. Every single time you speak, your brain is firing on all 3 of these cylinders at the exact same time.
When you chart this out, you get a matrix that wraps exactly how these high-level semantic strands are realized by specific structural units in the grammar. This anchors the abstract theory right into concrete grammatical physics. It is beautifully organized. If you want to study the textual flow of a message, you look at the theme and rime of the grammar. If you want to study the interpersonal proposition, you analyze mood and residue. And if you're tracking the ideational figure, who is doing what to whom, you dive into the transitivity system. It's a flawless mapping of macro-level meaning to micro-level grammatical execution.
Okay, section 3, dispersed domains of meaning, where we stretch meaning across the system.
The crucial point to grasp here is that while some meanings map really neatly to one specific unit, other semantic domains completely refuse to be boxed in. You can visualize the stark difference here. Figuration, that ideational map of who did what, is a compact realization. It is securely locked inside the transitivity system of a single clause. But a system like expansion, which is all about adding information, clarifying, or showing cause and effect, is totally dispersed. It ripples across multiple ranks of the grammar. You can express expansion through a tiny little conjunction, a whole dependent clause, or a massive prepositional phrase.
We can track this scale of integration perfectly with a quick example. Think about the phrase, "She didn't know the rules. Consequently, she died." That's a dispersed, 2-clause sequence loosely tied together by the word consequently. But watch what language allows us to do. We can seamlessly collapse that entire sequence down the rank scale into a single, highly integrated nominal group. Her ignorance of the rules caused her death. The meaning of cause literally shifted from a textual conjunction to an experiential verb. The physics of the sentence condensed, massively increasing the gravitational pull of the information. Let's head into section 4, the mechanics of modality, or what I like to call the physics of truth and desire.
Let's dive deeper into the engine room and examine one very specific dispersed domain. Most folks think modality is just a boring list of auxiliary verbs like can, might, or should,
But in SFL, modality is a measurable, topological space. It is the vast intermediate semantic universe that exists between absolute positive polarity, yes it is, and absolute negative polarity, no it isn't. It's the space where we constantly negotiate degrees of truth, probability, and obligation without ever fully committing to a yes or a no.
The architecture neatly divides the space into two distinct hemispheres. Up top, we have modalization. This is the indicative type, which we use for assessing information, so negotiating probability and usuality. On the bottom, we have modulation. This is the imperative type, used for negotiating goods, services, and actions, covering obligation and inclination. In this 4x3 matrix, it is an incredibly powerful tool for cognitive scientists and language analysts. It maps the exact mathematical intensity, high, median, or low, of a speaker's stance across all four of those modalities. Think about it. There is a massive psychological difference between telling someone they are allowed to do something, which is a low-value obligation, versus telling them they are required to do it, which is high value. We intuitively navigate this matrix every single day to soften our demands or strengthen our assertions.
The hidden physics of this matrix really reveals itself when we transfer negative polarity. If you take a median value like likely and transfer the negative, the value stays entirely stable. It's likely Mary doesn't know mathematically equals it isn't likely Mary knows. The median remains median. But if you transfer a negative in the high or low extremes, it completely flips the structural value. It's certain Mary doesn't know, which is a high probability, flips to it isn't possible Mary knows, a low probability. Language literally balances its own equations.
Which brings us to our final section, grammatical metaphor in action, where we see language bending its own rules. This is our final theoretical milestone, where language fundamentally bends its own realizational rules to manipulate reality. Grammatical metaphor happens when there's a realignment between semantics and grammar. Normally, in a congruent realization, like saying it probably is so, the modality probably is neatly contained as an adjunct inside a single clause. But look at a metaphorical realization, I think it is so. The speaker has taken their subjective modality, peeled it completely off, and disguised it as an entirely separate projecting mental clause. They're dressing up their own assessment of probability as if it were a concrete fact about their brain state.
And we can actually prove this realignment using a really simple tag test. Take the sentence, I don't believe that pudding ever will be cooked, will it? Notice the tag question at the end. If I don't believe were a genuine statement about the speaker's mind, the tag would be, do I? But the tag attaches to the pudding. That proves that I don't believe isn't the main clause at all. It's just a metaphorical mood adjunct that really just means probably not. So why do we constantly do this? Why utilize these complex architectural realignments instead of just speaking congruently? Well, because dressing up subjective doubt as an objective fact is the ultimate survival tool for daily interpersonal skirmishing. We use grammatical metaphor to objectify our personal opinions. We say, it is certain that, instead of I strongly guess that. We project subjective certainty to totally control the dialogue, disguising our modal assessments as unarguable facts so that our listeners can't easily push back.
As we wrap up this explainer on the physics of systemic functional linguistics, I have a challenge for you. Take this matrix out into the real world. Listen carefully to your next conversation. Listen to a politician on the news. Pay close attention to when a speaker uses a dispersed realization or when they suddenly flip a modal polarity. Decode the hidden architecture behind what is actually being said. How are grammatical metaphors secretly shaping the reality of your own daily interpersonal skirmishes? Thanks for joining me today, and keep analyzing the system.